Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Vet Chats, where we help veterans share their awesome stories and keep positivity going throughout the veteran community. I hope you all had a great weekend. It's a longer weekend for some of us. Tonight we have an awesome guest. I'm really excited because she is a female veteran podcaster. Her name is Rachel Oswalt. She is a Navy veteran. And we're going to get her on. We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about military mental health is the main thing. I see she joined, so I'm going to get her on. To act a little funny before I got it. Hey, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hey, Rachel. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. How was your weekend?
It was good. Pretty relaxing. I tried to do the whole mic setup thing for this live, and there was too much of a lag. So hopefully my audio is okay. But
yeah, it sounds fine. I'm going without headphones this time too,
awesome.
Because every time I've been saving my lives and putting them on the podcast, it's been delaying. So I don't know. We're just gonna try everything. So.
It's all good. We're going with the flow. I love it.
That's right. That's right. We're both wearing hoodies. I love that.
Yeah, I'm repping my brand. So
Dave.
yeah,
Those look really nice. I like those.
Thank
Do you have
you.
other colors?
What was that?
Do you have other colors of those?
I don't actually just came out with apparel, and I haven't even really fully launched it yet. So this is my test round, but I really love them. So yeah,
ooh, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to checking that out. So speaking of that, let's get into you. Let's go into a little on your background. Let's start with where you're from and how you ended up in the Navy.
Yeah. So background, I'm from Iowa, Midwest, born and raised. Spent literally 22 years of my life in Iowa. The only reason I left was because of the Navy. So funny enough, I joined the Navy in 2012 originally, and I joined out of a really toxic relationship. I was still in that toxic relationship, and I joined the Navy initially just trying to have a better option. The guy I was with at the time wasn't working. I was working 2-3 jobs at a time, and I was looking for kind of a way out or an option. I ended up dropping out of the delayed entry program in 2012, was told I could never join the Navy again. I was cool with that. It is what it is. Well, 2014, the same recruiter comes back to me and says, hey, we're looking for people to join the Navy again. This is like a one chance type of thing. And he was like, you give me an answer within the next couple of weeks, or, you lose your opportunity again. I'd actually just gotten out of that really toxic relationship. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Let's do something different. And so realistically, I joined the Navy just to do something different with my life, just to kind of change my trajectory up a little bit, get out of Iowa. And I initially wanted to go into air rescue, some kind of spec ops. It was between air rescue or diver. So I spent almost a year fully training for that. Didn't end up making it into spec ops, but I did end up in avionics in the aviation field, which, got me out to Whidbey Island, Washington, where I am today.
Yes. Yeah. So, for those that don't know, what exactly did you do? I know you worked on aircraft, but what parts?
Yeah. So avionics, AT and avionics can either go I level, intermediate level, or O level, organizational level. I actually did both. And so I started out at FRC Northwest working on the small components of the aircraft. I guess the best way to explain it is you have your whole plane, right? Mm-hmm. And then within the plane, you have your bigger parts that you can kind of remove and replace. And then those parts get worked on by the intermediate level. So I started out there working on the parts of the Growler aircraft. And then I went to my next command, VQ1, where I was organizational level and worked on, the parts that you take out of the plane. You basically just kind of remove and replace stuff. But got to experience both sides of being in AT. And I'd say I do have a preference probably more for the organizational level, because I level is just very tedious, boring. We just kind of sat there and waited for a bench to run for 8 hours a day. And then if it stopped, remove and replace one part, and then sit there and wait like 5 to 6 hours again. So really boring, no windows in the building. It's Washington, so sometimes I would go to work and it'd be like dark in the morning, and then I would leave and it was dark again.
Oh,
So
no.
yeah, organizational level, you're more out there like actually on the plane working on stuff, and then there's more components to that job too. So yeah, a little different, but a little bit of the same stuff. I'd say the basics are the same, but yeah, really it's just like working on those components of the aircraft, the avionics components.
Well, gotcha. I mean, I did get my airpin, so like, you know, like some things are clicking. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I remember memorizing that at the O level. Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
all that.
you basically like brain dump it when you get that pin,
Right.
so I get it. Like, it's a lot, but and what's interesting is like it's different from platform to platform too. So like I could say I was an AT, I level, or O level, and my experience is going to be completely different than the next person's. So depends on where you're at.
Gotcha. So that was like a really good summary of what you did occupationally, like for work every day. But I'm going to ask you kind of an open-ended question, and then we can take it wherever you want. But how was like the culture of where you work? What was it like, you know, working in more of a male-dominated field, like as like ATs are?
Yeah. So I was not a fan of the culture when I was in both my commands. So I'll start with FRC. When I was there, when I first arrived, I was an E2, and I was one of the very few females. I think there for a while, I was like the only female worker in the shop. And it's such an interesting dynamic because in that shop, everyone did things the way that they did things, and they weren't really open to thinking outside of the box. And there was also a certain culture because it was a lot of males. So they were a lot, I mean, I don't know, when you have a bunch of guys working together in a workplace, there's certain things that just kind of fly that don't fly when there's a female there. And I think what happens is a lot of females join these workspaces and they just kind of join in with what the males are doing because they're uncomfortable doing anything else or speaking up or saying anything else. And so I'd say the culture was very toxic. I found myself spending a lot of time with the civilian that worked in that shop more than the military that worked in that shop. What I found later on after, you know, being in that shop for probably a year was that, you know, something that they did with a lot of the females that came in is they would look at their Facebook pages prior to them coming in. And I saw them do this several times. They'd check out their Facebook pages, try to get a feel for who they were. And then in my case, they actually called dibs on who would get me when I came into the shop. And I didn't find this out until later on when I was married. And they're like, well, we can tell you now because you're married. But yeah, I mean, and it explained a lot about how they treated me when I was in that environment. My second command when I was O level was toxic in its own way. I would say it was more toxic with a lot of those leaders were toxic. And the thing about the Pacific Northwest and the place that I was stationed at in general is a lot of people stay there for a really long time. And so they kind of get used to this culture of how things are. And it can create such a toxic environment, especially in this command, because this command should have gone away like years ago. I think 2017 was the original date that it was set to go away. And then they kept extending it, and it's still there. But the problem is now you have this personnel issue. So a lot of people stay there or they'll leave for 4 years and then they'll come back. And a lot of people get away with a lot of stuff just because of the way that command is set up. And so for me, when I first got to that command, I really loved it. It was not toxic. The guy that was the LPO, he was very, very good about making sure that, you know, I had certain goals. He was going to send me on certain detachments to meet those certain goals. And I was very, very motivated at that time. I went above and beyond. When I was in my C school, I was going back to my command to try to get qualifications because I wanted to go out on debt. I wanted to, you know, get my CDI. I wanted to qualify. You know, I had these certain goals that I wanted to hit. But then I had one leader that came in and she was having, I guess, personal issues in her personal life. I don't know what the deal was, but for some reason, she felt the need to really hold me back. She felt like I was progressing too fast. And so she went out of her way to make sure that I was not progressing as fast as I wanted to. So she put me on nights. She said that the only person that could sign off on my qualifications was her. She would leave early so that when I came into work, she couldn't sign off on my qualifications. Even when I would come in early, she left like 4 hours into her day to take care of her personal issues. And so there was this very large barrier to entry that came about probably a couple months after I joined that command. And what I found as I stayed at that command is that the barrier to entry for so many things was who the leader was. And it was so different from person to person. I had a few really good leaders. I had some really bad ones, but the culture when we would go on the road on a detachment was very much like leadership is out the window. Leadership isn't a thing. Everyone's just there to like party, drink, get through the detachment, do their job, and then all we really care about is drinking at the end of the night. And so that's one of the main reasons I decided that I wanted to get out, actually, is because I saw these leadership dynamics that were such a theme. And when I decided, hey, I'm no longer going to be that person that's pushing my hardest to work my ass off so that you guys can take advantage of me and have me work these really long days, because no one else wants to be in a position of a CDI because you guys are using and abusing them. Instead of trying to make it better, the answer was always, oh, well, if you become a CDI, then less people have to do so much work because now you're a CDI. And so then they use that against me. And I mean, there's so many stories I could share with how bad that leadership was. We had one leader, and I think I told you about this before we got on live when we talked the other day, that was very much against women. I mean, the guys would get together every morning, and literally, like, we'd have an hour between showing up to work and the maintenance meeting. And it would be like, guys are checking out sports, the stock market, whatever. And the women are the ones that are going and getting everything ready for work, checking tools, checking the tool log. And I mean, it's like, at what point is someone going to step forward and say, hey, this leadership is trash? Because I did try to bring it up several times, and I was shot down every single time. So yeah, each command was a little toxic in its own way. But all in all, yes, so much toxicity, and mentally, a lot of people cannot handle that. I definitely could not handle that mentally, and I got out ultimately because I didn't want to put myself through that kind of mental abuse every single day, hoping to maybe someday be the change in the Navy, knowing that I'm up against this group of people. I feel I do so much more good outside of the Navy than I do in the Navy.
Yes, absolutely. And Jay says the military bleeds so much good talent due to poor leadership.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's so true. It's so sad because, I mean, just one bad leader can, sour you for the rest of your enlistment or the rest of your contract. And it's like, yeah, I've had that thought too. Like, I want to stay in, I want to be that change. I want to be that female LPO that I never had, or, just someone that to really look up to. And that really makes me mad that the person that had it out to you was a fellow woman, because she knows what it's like to be a younger enlisted female. Like, you just have a target on your back. And yeah, I remember that too. I remember we'd get the name of someone and immediately like go to their Facebook, and like the guys would just be making comments. Like, we're all curious about who's coming. It's a small command. Right. But I mean, it's difference between being curious and being like almost predatory, right?
Right.
So how did you cope with this stuff? Did you have anyone you could turn to, or maybe even like unhealthy coping habits? Like, how did you deal?
So there was times when I really fell into deep depression, and thankfully I didn't cope with alcohol. I didn't cope with, the unhealthy things that a lot of people cope with when we're talking about like substances. But I would say that I became very withdrawn, and I lost a lot of my motivation. And I want to talk about how unhealthy this can be too, because some people stay in this place of withdrawing for 20 plus years. And yes, I wasn't drinking excessively. Yes, I wasn't smoking. Yes, I wasn't going and, doing erratic things that could get me in trouble. But when we start to establish this pattern over a year, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years of withdrawing within ourselves, we lose a sense of who we are. And I would say that that's something that I'm still working through. I tried the therapy route when I was in. It helped a little bit, but I still don't think that I found the right therapist for me to really start making those drastic changes. But I think that when we're talking about, like unhealthy things and how to get around that and how to navigate that, there's really no way that the Navy teaches us how to address those things. That has to be the one thing where a leader steps up and says, hey, I noticed you're not being yourself. I noticed you're withdrawing. And this is all I wanted. Like when I was at my command, when I was at VQ1, and I drastically changed from that person that was a go-getter and motivated to that person that didn't care and was withdrawn. All I wanted was for someone to be like, hey, I noticed that you're not the person you used to be. What's going on? What can I do to make this better? How can I help? And I never got that. I got people who were like, oh, you're a piece of shit. Oh, you don't care anymore. Cool. Just we're going to do all these things to continue to beat you down. We're not going to let you use TA to go to school. We're, going to make sure that you can't get these certain things. We're going to treat you like you're worthless instead of trying to be the leader that you need at this time to be better. So yes, there were unhealthy ways that I coped. I don't think that they helped. And I don't think that it's the unhealthy ways that people are really talking about.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great point. I haven't even talked about withdrawing on here. Even like a few things clicked for me, like some things that I have done and maybe do is withdrawing. And that's so important because, yeah, it does affect us. It's like you said, if you're in that place for 20 years, your growth is almost stunted. Yeah. You're not fully becoming whoever you're supposed to come. So how did you kind of like break through that part?
So I would say that I slightly started to break through while I was in, because I used that almost to my advantage. Like when I decided for sure that I was going to get out of the military is when there was my first like mini breakthrough, because I felt that I was no longer constrained by the shackles of the military having that hold over me. So I think, when we're in this kind of weird withdrawn space where we're like, man, what do I do? Do I stay in the military or do I get out? Mm-hmm. The military has this power over us, right? Where it's like, if I make the wrong moves, if I say the wrong thing, someone out there, someone above me now has the power to decide how my career goes. And that can be extremely depressing. So when I decided that I wanted to for sure get out of the military, it was very freeing for me. And I was finally in a space where I felt like, okay, so I know I'm going to get out, but now I can use my position and I can use my authority as an E5 to advocate for those around me, to stand up for those E1s that are coming into the command. People are trying to bully them. I can now stand up for them. Did it hurt me personally? Absolutely. Like there were people that absolutely could not stand me, and they made it very, very clear that they did not agree with me and they didn't like me. But I knew I was getting out, so I knew that attitude didn't affect me. I didn't get, any kind of award when I left the military as far as like a name or anything. Mm-hmm. I got like, I don't even remember what they're called, like the letter that like participation letter for like leaving my command. Yeah. Like these are the things that happen when you decide that, you're going to get out, you're going to advocate for, and you're going to stand up for other people. But I would say that like breaking through a lot of these barriers for me, it's a continuous journey. There's never any point where I feel like, oh, I'm completely on the other side of this and I'm good now. Like it's always a journey. Yeah. And I'm still learning things about myself, and I'm still connecting the dots to my service. I'm connecting the dots to my childhood. I'm connecting so many dots in so many different places. So now I don't think anyone ever really has like a moment where they're like, oh, yep, we're good to go. Life is peachy from here. And I don't think I ever want to be in that place, because it means that my growth stopped. But yeah, that's where we're at now. But I would say that like everything kind of really clicked for me and started when I decided I was going to get out of the military.
Yeah. Maybe breakthrough isn't the word for it. Maybe it's just like maybe learning how to tread the water, because you can easily go back into it, and right. You got to like figure out how to keep going, how to stay on top of it. But yeah, like you've gone above and beyond like your service, and you're wanting to help others that are going through it. And could you tell us a little about how you do that on your podcast, and what's your podcast called as well?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Your Story Doesn't End Here. I started it in November of 2021, and I had the idea for getting on some kind of platform for some time. I initially was like, maybe YouTube, I'm not sure. YouTube's a lot of work, so I didn't go on YouTube, but I started my podcast because I wanted to have a platform to get the word out there about what is truly going on in the military. I wanted to bring my advocacy to another level. So back in 2019, I started a petition to the MCPON while I was still active duty to make mental health better in the Navy. On top of this petition, I talked to a number of people who are active duty, reservists, veterans, and I said, hey, what would you suggest if you could go talk to the MCPON, if you could talk to the higher ups in the Navy, what would you suggest to make mental health better? Because I know that my perspective is just one of many. I got tons of stories of people that were telling me about their experience, what happened to them in the Navy, how they were treated, how mental health is poor, what their suggestions would be. So I created a 2 to 3 page Word document that had suggestions for what can we implement now, what can we implement a year from now, 5 years from now, long term. And I sent that to the MCPON alongside the petition. So I got a response from him. He emailed me back. He said, hey, in San Diego, we started this walk-in clinic. We're working on some things. Thank you. If I'm ever in Whidbey Island, I'd love to meet you. I said, cool. Nothing aside from that ever happened. That petition's actually still going. I think it's up to like 1,300 signatures now. And nothing drastic has happened. And so it was very disheartening to me getting out of the military, knowing that I've had a number of friends who have taken their lives, one as recently as a couple of days ago. I still know people that are struggling with their mental health, that are afraid to go to mental health and talk to someone because they know that there's still a stigma. They know that something might happen in their job. They might not get their clearance pulled, but maybe they're treated differently. Maybe people are upset because instead of going on a detachment or a deployment, they decided to stay home and take care of their mental health. And now someone else has to take their place. So they feel bad. I mean, there's so many different barriers to entry for mental health in the military. And so I started my podcast, A, as a platform for people to share their stories, speak their truth, but B, because I truly believe that if the civilian population knew just how bad mental health was in the military, they would be outraged. Because the stories in the news, they do not suffice. You know, a story in the news just saying, hey, 3 people took their life on this aircraft carrier the other day. People will read it and they might be sad, but they don't truly know what's really going on because they don't know that in-depth story. They don't know why those 3 people took their life. What are the conditions like on that boat? What are the conditions of leadership like? You know, what are the living quarters like? Why is it that people are taking their lives? Why is it that people are on the brink of suicide constantly in the military? And so I started my podcast so people can share their story, so that the population now knows this is what's truly going on. It's not, the military is not what a lot of people might think it is, because I've talked to people who have never served and they have a completely different idea of what it's actually like. And so, yeah, I mean, it's mainly an advocacy platform, but my big mission and goal is to really change the culture of mental health in the military, because I understand that it's going to be very, very challenging for me to change it from like a legislative standpoint and change what the military is doing. But what can I do to contribute to the culture change, to help create better leaders, to give people a place where they can listen to someone's story and maybe relate so they don't feel alone, and to also give people the tools so they can take control of their own mental health.
Yes, I love it. It's almost like kind of like bridging the gap, because you know, you are like an advocate for those who are still serving, because you know what it's like to be there and they can't advocate for themselves as best as you can. And you're also helping bring in people from the civilian world that who knows who that could, you know, find a way to be a catalyst. And also, you know, you got to count those small wins. That petition that you created, that did something, that turned some heads. You just never know. Like, that got people to sign that who now be more aware. So you got to count that. I think change doesn't happen as fast as we want it to. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. But just something like that could be like that first domino that's going to be the change. So I just want to congratulate you and say, like, that's a win, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah. So what kind of things, like, where do you see yourself going with this? Like, what's next for you?
Yeah. So still continuing to grow my podcast. I mean, people listening, sharing, subscribing, that makes such a difference. So I'm still very much in a growth phase of the podcast. I don't do a ton of marketing with it. Podcasting is a lot of work, and I have a lot going on in my life, so I do what I can, but I do release episodes every single Monday, 5 a.m. Eastern time. And so that the growing of the podcast, that's definitely on my radar for this year. Also working on launching a mental health support community for military and veterans, so that's in the works. And with that, just having a space every week where military, active duty, reservist veterans can just get together, have that community, hang out with each other. I think when we get out, especially, and then sometimes even when we're in, having that group of people that just understands and you can vent to, you can talk to, just hang out with, have them there. I think it's so, so important. And so that's in the works. I don't have an official launch date for that yet, but working on that. And then with that community, bringing in people that can help give these tools. Because one thing that the military lacks is leadership training especially for enlisted people. I can't speak to the officer side, but I've talked to people that are higher up in the Navy that have said, like, yeah, there's some leadership training, but it's not helpful. It's just kind of like, you know how it is, like training in the military, right? We sit down and watch a PowerPoint, like it's not effective. And so that's one of my greater visions for that community, is to give people the tools so that if you're a leader in the military, you can take this back. You can now, begin to be that leader that you've wanted. Because I think a lot of people maybe want to be a better leader, but don't know where to start. Maybe people want to take control of their mental health, but don't know where to start. So that's my big vision for my community, starting that. And then another thing more locally, but also kind of on the national level, there's a film that is coming out at the end of this year. It's called Stranger at Home. And it is for pushing for legislative change within the mental health part of the military. And so there's a website for that. I want to say it's strangerathome.org. Don't quote me on that. But there is a petition for them to, and I am working on setting up a private screening locally in Whidbey Island, Washington. So if you're local to the area, stay tuned for that. But I know they do private screenings all over the nation. They're working on setting those up. So that's also another thing that I'm working on here locally, and then something that people can check out. And then I highly recommend, checking out that petition too, because that's another way to, easily help create change. Signing a petition takes a couple seconds and can make such an impact. So those are a couple of my projects for the year that I'm working on to try to get more of an impact out there when it comes to mental health for our military community.
And is there a link on your page at all, or where can people find like a link? I'd love to share it after the show.
Yeah, I'll put it up there.
Okay.
I don't have it up there right now, but yeah, I'll update my link tree and I'll get it on there so that people can check all that stuff out.
Yes. Yeah. And, okay. So kind of going back to what you're talking about, leadership. So yeah, like you said, no one takes that leadership training serious. And I worked for the Navy as a civilian, and I have gotten great leadership training, and I'm not even in a leadership position, but like they had us go to this 3-day class, and I was like, wow, like I could have really used these skills. So the military already has these, they have these tools already. Why can't we give that class to the enlisted people that could also benefit from it?
Right.
I don't know. But like you said, you got a lot going on top of everything. You're a mama, you got out when you were pregnant. So I kind of wanted to talk about what that was like to, I got pregnant right after I separated. So I kind of know the feeling, but how was that for you to like already be pregnant and planning on getting out on top of everything else it takes to get out?
Yeah, so it was such a weird thing. I mean, I wasn't planning on having a baby when I got out of the military. My initial plan was to go to nursing school, and so I was actually in LIMDU when I got out. And the last year before I got out, I was in LIMDU, and it was really, really nice because being in LIMDU gave me that time to slow down and actually work on me and set myself up to get out. So pregnancy was like a very, very huge roadblock for me. I mean, I was not expecting it. I was actually set up to go to nursing school. I was already enrolled in Seattle Pacific University, which is a very good nursing school. my command was kind enough to let me start nursing school while I was still active duty, which is like unheard of because there were in-person classes. And so I literally was like doing my classes every single day. I would just phone muster because COVID was still kind of a thing. It was accepted and it was allowed, but I was supposed to go into my second quarter of nursing school right when I got out. Like literally dates were like aligned perfectly. And so the unfortunate thing is that I was in my second trimester when I got out. And so I had to make this decision of, you know, do I want to continue to go to nursing school while I'm pregnant? My school's 2 hours away. Clinicals were supposed to be 12 hours on a Saturday. COVID was still a thing. I didn't want to get the COVID vaccine while I was pregnant. I mean, there was so many, like the cons list outweighed the pros list. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to drop nursing school and I'm just going to figure it out. And so it sucked because like I didn't have a plan B. I had just had a plan A. Yeah, I've been such a believer like the last couple of years of like focus on your plan A, don't distract from your plan A. But like I think even if I did have a plan B, that because I wasn't planning on pregnancy, it's such a just different thing, right? Like you can't really get a job when you're about to have a baby because I need that time postpartum to be with my baby. And I've never wanted to be in a position where, you know, I'm working all day, especially in my first year of my baby's life. I really, really wanted to be around to raise her. And so, yeah, there for a while, I was just like extremely stuck feeling. And it sucked because it was like every plan that I had went completely out the window. On top of that, I was being told like from every avenue that TRICARE no longer covered me, which I found out like a year later that not TRICARE, but the VA would have covered my birth. Thankfully, I was able to get on state insurance and I had a water birth, which they're significantly cheaper than hospital births anyway. So, cool. Everything would have worked out. Yeah. And so, I mean, I really just been kind of figuring it out as I go. Thankfully, my husband, he owns his own business. And so financially, he was able to support me just kind of working on what I'm working on. And so started my podcast a couple months after I separated in 2021. Started learning real estate investing a couple months ago. And so I'm like doing a million different things and just trying to figure out like the best way to make it all work. And I would say I still haven't like fully mastered that yet, because in entrepreneurship, it really forces me to like look inside myself and face those demons that I have not wanted to face for so long. And so I would say right now I'm in very much a season of like working on me. So 2023, one of my intentions was to just like focus on me and get me back to like a good place and focus on self-care again. Because that first year of my daughter's life, I had her in January of last year. It was just all her, like focusing on being a mom. And so I'm taking a few steps back and, getting to that place that I really thought I was going to be in right when I separated from the military, but here we are.
Yes. Yeah, that first year. I mean, I feel like the second year that you're coming up, this has been more challenging. I feel like when we're pregnant, like we can take on the world. I don't know if it's the extra estrogen or whatever, but like I started so many new projects. I was so motivated. And then you put all your focus on your baby, but actually you focusing on yourself, you're putting your baby first, you're putting your family first, because when you're not okay, you can't help others. Right. You can't serve others. So it's not selfish. Self-care is not selfish. It is actually selfless, I would argue.
Right.
So yeah, but like how do you balance that? How is that being at home with her all the time? I mean, I have 2 days where my daughter goes to daycare and I'm just so happy those days. And I feel guilty, but I mean, it's a lot. Yeah. It is.
Yeah. So funny enough, I was actually on the internet searching last night, like articles about how women that are like CEOs and business owners balance being a mom and balancing their business. And the one answer that I found that was common between everything was like, there's really no right answer to that. Like every day is so different, especially with kids, because they're growing and every day is different with them.
No schedule.
Exactly. So one of the things that I've been trying to work on is just A, going with the flow, B, knowing that sometimes showing up, even if it's imperfect, is better than not showing up at all. And then C, I've been so like to-do list, task oriented my entire life, knowing that like it's okay if all I focus on is just one task in one day, and it's okay if I don't get it done. Because I find that often I get so like wrapped up in my overwhelm in my head that sometimes I just get like absolutely nothing done, and I just get extremely overwhelmed. And so I would say that I haven't like fully figured it out yet, but sometimes it's getting something done in the evening time, you know, because baby's down sleeping. Sometimes it's like bringing my computer to bed while she's like cuddling my leg so I can get something done. Sometimes it's working on my phone. Sometimes it's, you know, bringing something out and about in the car because she's sleeping in the back. And, you know, some days it's like I don't get work done and I'm just a mom that day. And so I'm still working on like being kinder to myself and like knowing that it's okay if some days I'm just a mom. But yeah, like it is extremely challenging finding that balance, because I don't think that there is really a balance. It's very much like a go with the flow.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not the boss. They are the boss of you. You have to go with their needs. Like if they're hungry, it's now. If they're tired, that comes first. Yeah, that really helped me to connect with you about that, because honestly, I've been struggling with her. She's very demanding, and working from home, I'll have my laptop. She'll just start hitting it. I can't work around her. She is anti-mom working at all.
Exactly. Yep. My daughter's the same way. So yeah, I recently started going to a local gym that has like a childcare at the gym, and that's like my me time because like, yeah, I love my daughter to death, but some days it's like I need the separation, and it's very, very hard to figure out what works, especially when you're on your computer and they're in that like slap the keys phase.
Yeah, and it's like then you find out something that works, and 2 weeks later it doesn't work anymore. It's so temperamental. It's a madhouse. It's crazy. But yeah, what was I gonna say? I'm sorry.
It's all good.
That I froze for a second. So what advice would you give to people who are getting out right now?
Do they know they're getting out before, or are we just talking like general advice for people getting out?
Yeah, people who are getting out, whether it's planned or not. Like what is like the one thing that they should really like, what ducks should they have in a row?
So, one piece of advice that I tell everyone that's getting out is I always tell people to take a period of time for you when you get out. Now, I want to add something to that because, I found that among a lot of other veterans that I've talked to, like they'll take the terminal leave period, but then when we get out, it's like freedom is like almost too overwhelming. So I found that there was a time period where I did like absolutely nothing. I stayed in my house and I did nothing. And it was like time was just passing. And it was like, what do I do with myself now? So I would say like when you get out, take time to you, but be very intentional with that time. So whether you need to go on a vacation, whether you need to just veg out at home, but don't allow yourself to stay in that space forever of just like the you time, because it can be very easy to get stuck in this like not doing anything. I'm still trying to figure out like the difference between the people that get out and are very successful and the people that get out and are not successful. And when I say not successful, I'm talking about, the people that are homeless, or the people that, get out and they move in with their parents and they're very stuck in their life. And I think a lot of that does have to do with preparation, because I know some people that very much like when they were in, they had their ducks in a row and they set themselves up. But I also felt that I was that person and everything changed last minute. So knowing that sometimes things are going to change and sometimes we have to go with the flow, and that's okay. But I would say like having support would probably be the number one thing that I would say to people. Plan as much as you can. That's great. CAPS is great. I hear I got like the JKO version of it, so it wasn't great for me. You can have the job set up, you can have school set up, and at the end of the day, everything might completely change. And don't feel stuck if it does change. Know that there's options out there, there's support out there. Reach out to support if you need it. But I would say like the main thing to have in place when you separate from the military is some sort of support system, so that if by chance something doesn't go as planned, you have someone to lean on to help get you through that, because it can be so incredibly like mentally taxing if you get out and everything goes to shit in your mind, right? And then it's like a lot of people run back to the military for this. We see it all the time, right? The people that are like, oh, I got out and I went back in because that's what's comfortable. But there's no growth in the comfort zone. Yeah. But when you're going through it by yourself, it can be so incredibly challenging to try to like push through that tough period. So I'd say like if there's one tip, one piece of advice I would give, have a support system and make sure that they're actually supporting you, not just like someone that's there and they're not actually supporting you during the rough time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is so important. I was a part of a study and they were trying to figure out that same difference. Like what's the difference between veterans that are successful after or ones that, have more issues. And they were kind of leading to their answer as previous trauma, like childhood trauma, stuff that happened before they even joined the military. And then the military, just pouring into their cup where it's overflowing. So I think that was great advice, how you say to like really focus on yourself and make sure you're good. And yeah, have that support system and make sure you're not going back to an environment that kind of like fosters that what you want to join the military to get away from.
Right.
So yeah, great advice, Rachel. So we can find you on your podcast. It streams everywhere, right?
Yes. Yeah. My podcast streams everywhere. Apple, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Spotify. And then my Instagram page is _YSDEH. My website is a little wonky at the moment, but it should be up hopefully in the next couple weeks. And it's www.ysdeh.com. And then I'm also on Facebook too. Same thing, facebook.com/YSDEH.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a part of it. Thank you for being an awesome woman veteran out there, advocating and being a voice to those who are still serving. And thank you for being on Vet Chats.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone who joined. It was so great to have you all. Thanks for the comments on the live. I know we didn't read a lot, but that's all right. But yeah, I hope you have a great week and we'll be in touch.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a great conversation. And yes, if you're my friend and you're not following this page, make sure you follow this page, The Millennial Veteran, because she's awesome.
Thank you so much. Have a great night. Bye.